All right, EntreArchitect community, it's 4 p.m. Eastern, which means it's time for the EntreArchitect Context and Clarity live conversation for Thursday, September 1st. Happy September, everybody. Oh, feels like fall around here, but not
Does it?
really.
No.
No, it does not. Happy middle of the summer, everybody. Oh boy, if this is your first time here, welcome. Glad you're here. Glad you found Context and Clarity live. Let us know that you're here. Say hi. Depending on where you are, let us know where you are. Tell us about yourself. If we've never met before, my name's Jeff. I'm in Indianapolis. I come here every weekday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern for one reason, so that we can find clarity around the things that matter most to you, the architect. It doesn't matter if you're the employee of a firm or you own your own firm. Maybe you circled a date on the calendar and you've said 2022 is my year and you're on the runway to starting your own thing. Or maybe you have owned your own firm for a year or 10 years or 33 years and you're starting to rethink or reimagine what that firm could or maybe even should be. All of the topics that we cover, one topic every day, they all fall under the broad umbrella of the business of architecture, and they're all the need to know topics for the success of small firm architects just like you. So thanks for joining us today. Great to have all of you here. And as usual, for Context and Clarity Live, I am joined by Katharine MacPhail. Hi, Katharine.
Hello, Jeff. Nice to see you.
It is good to see you.
Well, I just want to say, I feel like I need to say this every year, but actually September is still summer. I mean, it is still summer until the 22nd. And so
it is technically still summer. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it feels like, that's when we used to go back to school and it feels like summer's over, but.
Yeah, but it actually doesn't. And I remember just wearing wool, like a new wool skirt and in my new wool sweater and my knee socks and just being so miserable because really it was summer, but I wanted it to be fall.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just not even
blazing hot for most of our audience right now.
Right. So I think we should stretch out the whole summer vibe until the third week of September.
All right. Happy summer, everybody.
Happy summer.
Welcome back. I see Chris joined us from Massachusetts. He's the first on the screen, which means that he is the winner of today's John Kinney Memorial Crocheted Bathtub Award. Mark R. LePage, welcome back from Waxhaw, North Carolina. Jefferson from LaLa, LA, La La Land. Glad you're joining us. All three of them are on Facebook. I see Megan Dowling. That's a familiar name, from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, on LinkedIn. Welcome back, Megan. Rings a bell. Scott Thrift, welcome back from San Francisco. Deb Schmucker, almost a neighbor in Indianapolis. Hi, Deb. Let's see. Chris says the bathtub needs to be deferred to Jessica, who was first, but must need a restream refresh. And there she is. Mm-hmm. Just going to comment that. That's a good reminder. If you are on Facebook right now and you're commenting away and you're going, hey, why are my comments not popping up on the screen like everybody else's? It's because you're in a private Facebook group, either EntreArchitect community or Architects and Allies. And Facebook has these rules. They have this privacy policy that says your name, your likeness, your comments can't leave the group unless you give Facebook permission. So in order to do that, there is a URL in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen right now. It's chat.restream.io/FB, as in Facebook. If you type that into your browser window, a couple of clicks later, you can give Facebook permission to let all those things out, and your comments can show up just like Jessica's do now. She's joining us from LA. Welcome back, Jessica. Christian from Ithaca, New York, and Sophia. Hi, Sophia from Boston. Glad you're joining us today on LinkedIn as well. So we've got Facebook and LinkedIn covered.
I think we're winning. Good. I mean, not to be, competitive myself, but yeah, Massachusetts, we got 3 people.
You think Massachusetts is winning? Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Well, let's see. When we add our guest into the mix, which we'll introduce our guest in a minute, that may change the balance a little bit.
Okay.
So just saying.
I don't think so.
But you can claim it
right now. Yeah.
All right.
Something.
Go Massachusetts, go. All right. With that, we've been looking forward to this story for a while. I think there are a lot of people in our community that have really been looking forward to the story we're about to hear and learning from it and being able to apply it to their businesses, to their firms. So let me go ahead and introduce our guest today, who is an architect. a wife, and a mother, and not necessarily in that order. Maybe we'll find out more about that. She's also a servant leader and a volunteer at a local, state, and national level. She's a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. She's the co founder of Dougherty plus Dougherty Architects, and now the managing principal at Perkins Eastman. Betsey Olenick Dougherty, welcome to Context and Clarity Live.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Katharine. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here. Like I said, we've been, I will ask all the time, right, for people, hey, if you have a recommendation, if you have a suggestion for a future guest for Context and Clarity Live, who would it be? And your name came up with someone that I think from someone that I think you know pretty well. And it was really related to these conversations that we have around the idea of, hey, I started my firm and now I'm growing my firm and it's going to evolve, and all the things that happen over the life of an architect, the life of a firm. And Mandy Freeland said, you need to talk to Betsey. I said, okay, I'll reach out to Betsey. So thank you for joining us. We've been waiting to hear this story. Can you tell us, starting with birth,
I don't know if that's necessary, but I am a boomer, as you can tell by looking at me. And I know that those of us who fall into that genre find ourselves in a period of transition professionally.
Yeah.
But our origins go way back. So to take you back to the Wayback Machine a little bit, I do believe that we all credit our parents. If we had a great relationship with parents who we loved and respected and they supported us in whatever we wanted to do, that's where it begins.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where my story begins. And if you want to go back to birth, I was just mentioning I was born in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. My dad was a naval officer. We relocated to the U.S. when I was 2.5, settled in Southern California. That's where I grew up. And probably my career story begins in high school when I wanted to take a drafting course. And I was not permitted to do so. This was 1967, and girls did not take drafting.
Amazing.
So the best I could do was art classes, and I piddled around, with art at home, and did a lot of my own sculptural work. And so I got into woodworking. That was how I built a portfolio to get me into UC Berkeley as an art major.
Amazing.
And it was there that I felt a little marginalized because I thought that the art department was so subjective and self-important that it made me a little crazy. And in the dorm, I saw these groups of people getting together in the common areas with rolls of drawings spread out. And I kind of walked up to them. I said, "What is it that you are doing?" And these were architecture majors. And I thought, I would like to do that. So because I was in the regular letters and science department, big university, California University, and wanted to have the ability to consider a transfer into the College of Environmental Design, which was a whole separate entity, even a separate building. I had to file a request with the registrar's office, go through a whole series of interviews, and ask for permission to be able to take a course in architecture, which I was allowed to do the third quarter of my freshman year. So I took Architecture 101, which was a studio class, and Joe Esherick was my instructor, and he was head of the department at the time. And I don't know if any of you know Joe Esherick, but he was my hero and mentor, and he got to be my instructor. As I said, Joe was the only one who was willing to pull the short straw and deal with all these kids who didn't know what the heck they were doing. And he inspired me and encouraged me. And from then I had to go through I had to take an IQ test. I remember it to this day that they changed the direction of the lighting on a clock that was rotating and you had to say which way it was. I remember that. And then go through a whole series of interviews with the chairman of the Department of Architecture, the whole 9 yards. So I got in. And ultimately, that class that I managed to graduate with in 1972, I was one of a half a dozen women in the entire class of 300.
Whoa.
So times have changed, and they changed actually as soon as when I got into the graduate program, which I went back to at Cal. So while I was undergraduate, I met Brian Dougherty. You might recognize that name. And we met through a common friend who said, "Hey, you have to come to, room 103C, which doesn't exist anymore, and there will be a guy there with a guitar." And Brian was the guy with the guitar. So Paul, our mutual friend, and Brian and I became the Three Musketeers, and we did group projects together. And by the end of the following year, he decided that there was no future with his high school sweetheart. I broke up with my boyfriend, and we became a couple in 1972 after the winter break. And that was 50 years ago. Can you believe that?
Congratulations.
Seriously, and it was at that time that we talked about someday having a practice together. So we were kids. We celebrated our 21st birthdays together and moved to Southern California, worked for the same firm for a year. I walked in, got the job. They said they were hiring. I went down. Brian's waiting for me on the curb. I said, "Brian, they're hiring. Go up and talk to them." Because nobody was hiring in the Bay Area. We had to go south for that. They hired him too, and of course, and he shows them the portfolio that we did a group projects, and they said, "Gee, we've seen this before." And he said, "Oh, has Betsey been here?" I thought, "Come on, Brian, seriously." So we both got hired. We both worked for the same firm. That was that summer that we went across Canada and the U.S. and I met his family for the first time. And we were married in between our first and second years of grad school at Cal. We went back to Berkeley because we loved it. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. As a freshman, I was there during People's Park. My parents just, "You're going to Berkeley?" They saw me on TV 3 times my first year there. One of them was a good thing. We were designing an adventure playground in one of our studios. The others were, the predictable. But
Yeah.
so our students did not even know we were a couple because we were both graduate TAs as in our graduate program. And they kind of discovered that when we had a big party at our house at the end of the year. And then we both worked for companies in the Bay Area for about a year and a half before we decided we wanted to be close to family because we were both very family oriented. And this was before cell phones, all of that. And we happened to mention it to my mother, who starts going through the newspaper for ads and sees an ad from, and I don't know if you recognize the name, William Pereira Associates, Bill Pereira's firm, designed the UC Irvine campus, the entire commercial aspect for the whole Irvine company at the time, which we now call Fashion Island Newport Center. And they had a very cool building there, which was all the ranch buildings from the Irvine company, all clustered in one location. And Brian worked directly for Bill Pereira, over the shoulder, late nights, like the dream job. And I found a job with Bill Blue Rock, and we both moved to Southern California. So it was a really fast move. There was a little bit of culture shock that went along with that, because as much as I'd like to say that women being embraced in the profession was universal, it was not. And there was, as you know, the Bay Area is very hip happening and forward thinking, and Orange County was predictably conservative.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the first woman to be hired in anything other than a secretarial position at William Blue Rock and Partners. And Bill Blue Rock at the time was on the AI National Board. So that's kind of where I got a little bit of my interest in AIA. But primarily, Brian and I both ended up locating in Orange County and looked around. AIA had all of these amazing opportunities, and there were no young people at the table. So we found out that the board there was an open meeting. So, hey, what do Berkeley people do? You just show up, right? So we showed up and started showing up at the board meetings. And before we knew it, a friend of ours, including Bill Blue Rock's son, Tom, led the associate, of which now I'm involved with the emerging professionals at AIA. So what goes around comes around. So we ended up getting actively involved in AIA and had what I would have to say now, because there are so many opportunities now, we had a rather traditional path. The least traditional part about it probably was me. But Brian and I kind of followed each other through the chairs of all the leadership opportunities at AI Orange County, went on to AI California, which was then AI California Council, is now AI California. Went through the chairs. So I was president of AIA California. I think Brian was secretary. So we were kind of doing this through it. And then ultimately I went on to the national board. At that time, it was when I became a member of the College of Fellows, which is kind of a big deal. I still, really treasure that opportunity to, now they're my buddies, to cohort with that group of leadership. And this is a nationwide collective of great minds who have all different kinds of opinions. And of course, as Californians, we're always the crazy ones. Go California, California crazies, especially when you go Berkeley. And I've been told by my staff that I often do that. So Brian and I both ended up active in the AIA through California. And then when I became National AIA Secretary, Brian was on the board representing the California directors. And I was National Secretary. And then when I was selected to be on the College of Fellows Executive Committee, and that's a 4-year gig with being in one room with 3 other amazing people. One of the most wonderful leadership experiences of my life. Brian was the secretary of AIA. So we used to tell AIA that they were getting a twofer because they only had to get 1 hotel room for 2 people. It would help them to balance the budget. And that experience in leadership is something that I'll never forget. And as a result, as you can see, I'm kind of still doing it all of these years later. So I think it was 2003 when I was, somebody can look it up, when I was a chancellor of the AIA College of Fellows. And all of these years later now, I have the great joy of sitting in a room with the emerging professionals who are these young, amazing, talented, energetic, creative, thoughtful people who see the advantage in sort of a collective room like that, and how important it is for us to be talking about the future and careers. And I'm a big advocate of licensure. If that comes up, I'd be happy to talk about that. And as I tell a lot of young people in our office, men and women, this is the most important thing you can do for yourself. You came this far. Get that credential, call yourself an architect, and then lead. And there are a gazillion directions that you can go, once you have that opportunity achieved, and it is not easy. So I'm happy to say that, and I'll talk a little bit about our merger with Perkins Eastman, that Perkins Eastman values that as well. And they do something that we did as a studio. We had maybe 40 people in 2 offices in Northern and Southern California. We always paid for exams. We always paid for licensure, and Perkins Eastman does the same thing. And many large firms, not all of them, but many do. So I've kind of skipped over a couple of really important things because I know there's a question about family. So it's not just me and Brian, although we realize that what we have is something that's very special, and we do feel blessed. And I can't imagine life any other way than sitting next to my partner. He's not next to me right now because he's working from home today. But we do have 2 children. And the first one was born the day that I basically started our practice.
So how far into your career were you on that day?
I was
when
already
you started
licensed. I was licensed in 1978, and our son was born in 1979 in November. So I was licensed in May of 78, but I was already working. I happened to work in-house for UC Irvine. And so then our son was born in November 1st of 1979, which we call that the day that we opened the practice. And quite literally the night before I went in for my C-section, I turned the plans in for our first project to be approved by the city of Newport Beach. I came down to the wire, isn't that what we all do? So it was no different than being in school and that was the beginning of our practice, was that project. So this child, do the math, he's now 42, Gray Dougherty, surprise, is an architect.
Did he have a choice?
Well, he did actually. He was a brainiac. He went to Princeton University, thought that going on to, to the world of money and Wall Street was the way to go, and got his job 6 months before graduation. We thought, oh, we're done with that one. Well, a few months into that, he called us and said, I can't spend the rest of my life doing this. And took a little bit of a break and came back to us and said, I think I want to go back to school in architecture. And I told Brian, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I really did not see that happening, because he was going to go out. First, he was going to save the world. Then he was going to make $1 gazillion. And then he chose to be an architect. So imagine all of those, nights talking about architecture over dinner probably had some sort of a subliminal influence on him. But we'd bring work home and spread it out on the dining room table, and he'd grab a magic marker and start coloring it up for us. And we knew he was visual spatial, and he was building 3D puzzles and doing all that business. So it was no surprise that that was his passion and that it would come easily to him. And he's a force. I mean, literally, if he's watching this, hey, Gray. And he started our Oakland studio. And then after a few years, came to us one day and he looked me in the eye and said, Mom, every time we get together, all we do is talk about business. I want you to be my mom again. Oh my God, how do you say no to that? So Brian says, well, you need to find somebody to replace you then. And he did. He found a mutual friend, an amazing guy who to this day now runs the Oakland studio of Perkins Eastman. And he was a vested interest participant in Dougherty and Dougherty before the merger. And so that's pretty exciting. And where does Gray? He's working for our competition. He's working for Gensler in San Francisco, heading the higher education studio. Anyway, so then years after that, our daughter Megan went to school, UC Santa Barbara. It's very comfort zone for being a Southern California kid. Was probably more interested in campus life and her sorority than in finding her passion. She got a degree in business and economics because I think she thought, whatever I do in life, that's a good background to have. She actually started her own business online. She had then ended up spending some time at FITM, where she learned about sustainability and all of the different aspects of it, and became a true believer, and had a couple of internships that got her on that road. And so she, for a while, had her own website selling sustainable products worldwide, and enjoyed that, but it was tough, but she also had the business background, and she came to us and said, I know you do designs that are all about sustainable buildings, because we've done some pretty wonderful, interesting things. The first one being the Center for Regenerative Studies at Cal Poly Pomona, which was a vision of John Lyles, and it's been named after him now, and he was our client, as was Marvin Melica, who was the head of the Department of Architecture at the time. Both became great friends. So she said, I think maybe I'd like to do that. I thought, we really could use somebody who can help us get through all of the certification processes for lead projects. And so before you know it, she was doing that with our office, and said, I think if I want to become an architect, I guess maybe I better go back to school. But I'm going to be almost 30 when I get out of school. I said, look, Megan, if that's really something you want, then you should do it. And 6 weeks later, she was sitting in class at the new School of Architecture and Design in San Diego.
Wow.
And she ended up, she was at her commencement. She was the commencement speaker, and it was, so now we have 2 architects. Never saw that one coming. And Megan does still work. So she worked for Dougherty and Dougherty, and and she was a vested participant in Dougherty and Dougherty. And when we merged with Perkins Eastman, she came along, and so she's an owner in Perkins Eastman, and she is now the whole Western region representative for sustainability for the firm. And this firm really, we're members of the AI 2030 initiative, and have a really strong emphasis on not just sustainability, but health and wellness. And so there you go. So there's the family. We do have a grandchild. She's not ready for college yet, so we'll see what happens. But she has her. Yeah. Well, she has our son Gray's energy and enthusiasm, and so we'll see where that takes her. So that is the family story. So now you get a little context for the merger story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
before you go
uh-huh,
there,
uh-huh.
just as I'm listening, I'm just thinking, I don't think there's any way to extract, it's a wonderful story. I don't think there's any way to extract the family from it, right? It's
Not
just
really.
part of the DNA of it.
It is. Yeah.
What is the, what has been, I guess, the best part and then the worst part about this being a whole family affair?
Well, probably the most difficult part was that conversation with Gray
Yeah.
when he chose to make his own way. And I can appreciate that.
Mhm.
Megan just got married. She gets to change her last name. She doesn't have to carry that brand.
That's gonna be her escape, is that?
Yeah, so kind of. But I would say that was a tough one for me.
Yeah.
Because I kind of felt that I was the reason that it didn't, things weren't working out. But I certainly understood it, and Gray and I have a lot of characteristics in common. So
Mhm.
that was maybe the worst.
Okay.
Also, I think that when all of your kids are working for you and the market is tough,
Yeah.
you worry a little bit about their future because they are a part of your future and they don't have their own gig.
Right.
So I think that's a serious aspect of it, and that
Mm.
would worry me sometimes because, as we know, how many times have we been through these
Right.
recessions and depressions and cycled in and out of them, and so you don't want to have to take your kids with you through that. But they both have business degrees, so I mean they can spreadsheet me under a rug. They can see things coming that I can't. And they're amazing. So the best part is we are blessed.
Yeah.
We are so blessed to have kids who have found themselves, and of all things, within the choice that we made for ourselves, they found it was also a place that they could be their own people. And they're very different people, and they practice architecture in very different ways.
Mm.
And I think maybe that's something also that the listeners might want to hear and understand and appreciate, because there are so many ways that you can be an architect.
Right.
And the ways are endless. And ours happen. I would have to say that when I think of my own personal path, it was pretty straight arrow predictable.
Mhm.
And today there are so many other choices because, it's kind of like an arrow going through leave high school, get into a good university, graduate, get some experience, go back to graduate school, get your license, open your practice, ba-doom, 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 and here I am today. And 50 years have gone by. Brian and I are going to the 50th anniversary of our undergraduate graduation at Cal in September at homecoming this year. So
Wow.
I know. It's 50 years with the same guy. Oh my God. Anyway, I think I've kind of covered the working with family. And if you would ask me
Yeah.
how I look at the merger acquisition with Perkins Eastman, I would suppose maybe you would have to say that in life, chapter 1 is, home life with your family. And then when you go away to college, it kind of begins chapter 2.
Okay.
And then Brian and I get together as we predicted and worked for other people, and then ultimately started our own practice. Very scary. $10,000 non-secured line of credit from the bank. I mean, seriously, that's how we got it, through a connection that I had at a former office where one of the principals was on a board of a school district, so they couldn't get the job, but they referred me because we were a woman-owned firm. So I'll
That's
take that, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and so that's kind of how it started. So then what that would be, starting our own practice would be chapter 3, and so now it's chapter 4. And Brian and I knew when we turned 65, and our staff called this the rolling 5-year clock. We should start thinking about leadership and ownership transition, because we don't want to think that all of these years that we have spent building this practice, I mean, it just goes down the tube. We hired a consultant from the Cox Group. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that, who came to our office, put a mirror in front of us and said, okay, you've got a few choices. Number 1, you kiss everybody goodbye and close the door. That's not what we wanted to do. Number 2, you do a merger acquisition. Look for a match, which we hadn't really spent much time talking about or thinking about. Number 3 was doing an ESOP, where everybody kind of owned a piece of the action, and he recommended we don't do that. And for those of you who are in one, please forgive me, but the advice that was given to us was there a lot of those are in court. Do you really want to go down that path with that amount of risk? And the answer was no. And the third one was, of course, just identify people. Sorry that. Come on. Brian Dougherty knows we're having this call. What the heck?
I know.
Can you hear that? Did you hear that? So I have one of these watches. I call it the Dick Tracy watch. So all you do is push the button, you talk to somebody, and they think you're a little crazy in the grocery store. Anyway, so where was I? So the other one was looking inside and finding leadership from within, and so we ended up kind of doing a hybrid. So the first thing we did is we talked to 6 people within our 2 studios in Orange County and in Oakland in the East Bay, and of the 6, 3 said, I'm really not interested in ownership in a firm, and 3 said yes. One of those 3s was Megan Dougherty, by the way. So we found a way to structure and change go from a partnership to a corporation, and they became shareholders, those 3 people. About the same time, I guess the word went out that merger acquisition is a thing, because we started getting calls. We never called anybody. I know that question has been asked. Did you reach out to people? No. So the first one, we went after work projects together. I'm not going to name any names here except for Perkins Eastman, which is the person we said, I think we can work with these people. So the first one, we pursued a project together, and they did such a lousy job, and we didn't get it, of course, that we said, no way, we're not doing that. And then the second one got pretty serious to the point where we were having a whole series of meetings with leadership. And then when we kind of saw what the methodology was, we just didn't feel comfortable with it from the financial side of the house. And ultimately, I don't think necessarily that we were really what they were looking for, and they weren't what we were looking for. And so and these were good friends of ours who reached out to us, but we mutually agreed, this is probably not the right move, and we value our friendship. And so that one didn't happen. And then one day we get a call from the same guy who had been our consultant from the Cox Group, who called Brian on a Friday and said, Brian, I'm walking down the street here on 5th Avenue in New York City, and there's somebody I want you to call. And that was Brad Perkins. And he said, his name is Brad Perkins. He owns Perkins Eastman Architects in New York City. He's on his way back from a meeting right now in China. He'll be stopping in Southern California tomorrow with the head of the K-12 practice area studio, coming from a meeting, joining a leader of the LA office, because they had already merged with another firm that had an LA and San Francisco office, and that was LBL, which represented medical work and senior living. And so we were K-12, higher education and community. So together we would each bring something different. He said, I'd like you to meet them. And we had been entertaining these other things, so it wasn't out of left field. And so we said, sure. And it was on a Saturday. Our staff wasn't here. Let me tell you, this was a really hard secret to keep. Couldn't even tell our kids. I mean, nobody. And so they showed up the next morning, gave them a little tour of the office. We then got on the road and went to see a couple of our projects, had lunch together, went to see some more projects, had dinner together, and then they were on their way the next morning. And as we said goodbye, Brian and I looked at each other and said, this kind of feels right. I think we could work with these people. And I can share with you why. First of all, Perkins Eastman, as you may know, has grown tremendously through merger acquisition. Some firms do it just by cold turkey opening an office, or maybe acquiring just a single office, but this is a very deliberate effort on the part of Perkins Eastman, and we have in the last year, doubled the studios in the Western region. We now have a Western region. It's not just California. Wonderful people. Oh my God. I don't know if, the Wilcox group has got, we call them the matchmakers because we truly just thrive on each other. And it was the right thing to do, obviously, as you can tell by my opinion. And and we have a 5-year agreement. So Brian and I technically are officially retiring the end of 2023. That's just around the corner. It's hard to believe that over 4 years have passed, but we're now having conversations about maybe having some emeritus status, because once again, the boomers are all retiring, and my dad used to call it the R word. I don't think he ever really did retire, maybe at age 83. But how we can be purposeful and impactful and supportive and instructive and continue to love being architects after that contract is up, and what does that look like? So those are the conversations that we're having now. But so when we decided to merge, it took, well, let's see, that was in June of 2017, and we signed the papers on May 1st of 2018. It was almost a year of negotiating, signing the papers so that we could look at each other's books and, really get to know each other, get into the weeds, talk about everything under the sun, take care of business, because we're all still actively practicing architecture, to that day when 2 weeks before we told our office manager, we told our senior associate, and we told our our attorney and our CPA. And those were the only people who knew until we had a nice big breakfast brought into the office, sat everybody down and said, guys, guess what we did? And by the way, this was going on and we didn't tell you, I'm sorry, but we couldn't. And we announced it. And there were a couple people who felt like it wasn't the right fit for them. And so large firm was not why they joined Dougherty and Dougherty. It was a small studio. And a couple of them didn't last through the year. Everybody else just kind of has stayed with us. And, obviously time has passed now after 4.5 years, but we still have some of our original people. And we still have our 3 vested interest people from our previous staff. Lance Kutz runs our Oakland studio. He's amazing. And he's a full principal now with Perkins Eastman. Diego Matzkin is a full principal with Perkins Eastman, working with us in the managing principal role here in Costa Mesa. And let me tell you what we found in common. I think it's important. Do we have time?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we really take great pride in the culture that we nurture. And it is a studio culture. It's not a large firm culture, and we've been told that we're different, and we're allowed to do that, and we celebrate that. And Perkins Eastman embraces that. I think those are really important things. Woman-owned firm, Mary Jane Eastman, a year after we established our office, with Brad, established Perkins Eastman. She, I think, is the longest serving principal of a large firm ever. And I established at what at that time was a woman-owned practice in Southern California. So we were the first woman-owned firm in Southern California, which was, obviously kind of ahead of the game. And it did help us to establish our practice because a woman business enterprise had some chops at that time. I don't think it really does anymore. But so we shared that. It was really important. And because of that, also, I think both firms attracted women, professional women, women in leadership, women with families. We've been 50% female from day one, and we still are. And as I've always said, I hire the best person for the job. And maybe it had something to do with having a visible woman principal, probably. But I'm seeing people responding about Gray. Our son Gray, by the way, is very social, and everybody knows Gray, and he's been involved in AIA and everything else. So you'll probably see that's who he's talking about. Yes, it is a small world. And so now I can't remember what I was talking about. I got a little distracted there.
You're talking
But
about women working for your firm.
yes, and so Dougherty and Dougherty in 2011 was awarded the Diversity and Inclusion Award from AIA. It was long before Perkins Eastman because we merged in 2018, but we shared that. We shared those values of diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just gender. We've also always had a very diverse international staff. I don't know, it just happened. It was not deliberate, but so enriching. And so we celebrate that today. That's also very important to Perkins Eastman. Something that Perkins Eastman, and also paying for exams. I think I mentioned that.
Yep.
Perkins Eastman has black spectacles. They hand it to every person in the company who's looking to take the exam. Paying for that. Yeah, black spectacles is a study that they have.
Oh, I thought they literally gave everybody black glasses.
Well, I'm sure that was sort of part of, I didn't name that company, but I'm sure that was a subliminal message there.
Yeah, I guess.
I'm wearing my black spectacles
Me too,
today.
Mhm.
So, so that was really important. And I've always been involved in AIA, and I've always felt very strongly about licensure. To this day, I'm kind of politically interested and remain politically interested through AIA California. As you know, now I have the great pleasure of getting on the line with the California Emerging Professionals, and that is all about encouraging these young people. I don't know what this thing is about not wanting to get licensed. What? I mean, you've dreamt about being an architect. You go to school to become an architect. You get a job as an architect, and you're not going to take that stupid exam. It's not fun. Can't do it for you. I can pick up the tab. And for heaven's sakes, call yourself an architect. You deserve it. So I'll get off my horse about that. But Perkins Eastman feels the same way that we do. And that was really important as well. So I would have to say the one really amazing thing that Perkins Eastman does as a large firm, and I learned because I was at the last Women's Leadership Summit, and I'm going to this one in September in San Jose, that when I was sitting at a table with large firm folks and sharing what we do, and I know some people were kind of holding it close to the chest, but something that Perkins Eastman does that not one other large firm at that table did, we have a firm-wide mentorship program in-house. You can choose anybody except maybe for Brad, who probably has 50 people who want him as their mentor. I'm Mary Jane, but you can pick anybody in the firm and reach out to them and say, would you be my mentor? And you're supposed to only have 2. I have 6, of course, because I think mentorship is really important, which is another reason why Perkins Eastman was in step with us. And that's why I enjoy the emergency professionals so much. But it's the only firm that I know of, and you can do a ladder. I could choose a member of the executive committee as a mentor here, and then I can have another mentor down here. We call that a ladder. I'm in between. And so we're constantly sharing ideas, supporting each other, sharing experiences. It's a joy for me to do this. So you're only supposed to have 2. I have 5 or 6. I kind of lose. I've got them written down so I don't lose anybody. And they pick up the phone and call you and said, "Would you be my mentor?" I can't say no to that. I mean, it's like, this is what I live for. And it doesn't take a lot of time. You get on the phone. It can be as infrequently as once a quarter and as frequently as once a month. And I do both. And I learn so much from these young people and their experiences. And then I share my story, and it resonates with me because this is all about professional growth. This is all about being a member of society and humanity and what we can do. It doesn't just break your heart when you watch the news at night. Oh my God. First of all, we can't seem to get on top of war. I don't know why. And then, as we're all dealing with this global warming, and here I am sitting in my office in Southern California. Ordinarily, it's maybe 80 at this time of year, and it's 95 outside. And our plants are withering, and we can't water them, and it's like all the things that we were talking about, and our thesis. Brian and I both had a thesis in sustainability. term wasn't coined at the time. Then, of course, we worked on the Center for Regenerative Studies at Cal Poly Pomona early in the game. But then we said, we're on a 30-year clock. We have to do something. Well, that was 40 years ago.
Mhm.
That date has come and gone, and we're still in trouble. And I'm supposed to be a member of this great society that was going to save the world. You know, I was in Berkeley in the 60s. Well, we did a good job of that, didn't we? I think we've really screwed up big time. And I think we all have to feel personally responsible for it. And as architects, we can take the responsibility for that 50% of the impact that comes from our built environment.
Mhm.
And our natural environment. So it's another passion of mine. People ask me, what are you going to do after you retire? And I got about a dozen things.
I bet.
The first of which, believe it or not, my father being in World War II left behind weekly messages, telegrams to my mother that I found after they both passed away with words cut out of them.
Hmm.
And I'm going to scan every one of them, and I'm going to write his book that he never got to write. So that's the first thing I'm going to do when we retire.
Amazing.
And he has photographs that nobody's ever seen. They're in his little photo. He has a picture on his battleship taking a photograph of a kamikaze plane that's headed right towards him.
Wow.
Holy cannoli.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna pair the letters and the photographs. I'm really excited about it. So it's a big project. I was gonna do it when Megan went to college. It didn't happen then. So now I'm gonna have the time. But there's just so many things. The need is so great.
Yeah.
So I'm a kid from Berkeley in the 60s, basically.
Yeah.
Haven't changed.
It's an amazing story, and obviously your passion, just pours out of this, right? One of the things that I know some folks in our audience, in our community, wonder about, and it interests me to find out that people started calling on the mergers and acquisitions side. People started calling, and we have some in our community that are the same way. It's like, hey, we've had a couple people reach out. And one question that comes up is, what will I be giving up? And I think that's usually in terms of maybe future finances, but also in terms of, and I don't want to put words in anybody else's mouth, but also in terms of the future, the culture that I have versus the culture, the merged culture. And obviously you've talked a bit about
That's important.
the culture at Perkins Eastman in the way that it was. When you think back about the journey, how many employees, how big was Dougherty and Dougherty prior to the merger?
We never had more than 40 in the two studios.
Okay, and now
That's
Perkins
combined
Eastman is
at 1,200
1,200. Okay,
in
yeah,
25 offices. I lose count. Might be more like
yeah.
1,250 now. But and I do see a comment here, which is something that I appreciate. Did you ever miss being a small practice and having full control versus not full control?
Yeah, that's a great
And
question.
thank you, Yoko, because it occurred to me before, and once in a while, when I'm in a position where I need to make a decision or make a call or have something to contribute, I think about that. I have to respect the fact that this is no longer just my company. I
Yeah.
can't go off and make a unilateral decision. As you can imagine, I really don't like to have to ask permission for anything.
It's back
But
to
I
Berkeley.
respect, but I respect when it's appropriate because we're a team sport.
Yeah.
And so in a way, I do miss the small practice. But the one comment, Yoko, that my husband Brian, who did all the financial side of the house, I kind of do the HR and marketing, and he did the financial, and was I never have to go to the bank and ask for renewal on our line of credit ever again in my whole life. So that we do not miss. And I have to tell you that those day-to-day concerns, when you are a small practitioner and you have people's livelihoods and families and lives in your hands, I had a lot of sleepless nights. I don't have those sleepless nights anymore. It's somebody else's ultimate responsibility, and we do our part to knock it out of the ballpark and make sure that we are successful. And right now, I have to tell you that our studio, our former Dougherty and Dougherty, which is now the Perkins Eastman, Costa Mesa, Orange County, and Oakland East Bay studios that have merged with Via, one of our merger partners, and that's been awesome. Doing pretty darn well. And we are still holding on to that same culture and our cultural values. So financial standpoint. So anybody will tell you that if you have your own practice, you can, be more successful financially. And remember that we're architects. So if we were going to go for the money, we would have gone into, we would have been attorneys. I have a lot of my friends who are attorneys who said, I thought for sure you were going to become an attorney. Well, no, I didn't want to do that. I'm a slow reader. But and also I could not take that home with me every night, strife. No, there's enough strife in trying to keep everybody happy in architecture. So that just that certainly would not be worth it financially for me. So did we make a good living? Yeah, we did. So I think we're not gazillionaires, but we're doing okay. I think we can retire comfortably. I think we were our the value of our firm in the merger was fair, and we worked really hard together. We each had our, consultants on both sides of the house working on that with us. And so Brian and I do have shares within Perkins Eastman, and we have a gradual 5-year buyout, which I also like because if you're given a big chunk of money over 1 or 2 years, guess what? You get to pay the taxes on it, like boom. And this way it's kind of spread out a little bit when you are no longer making that salary. So there were a lot of things about it financially. Now remember, we're in our 70s there, so life is a little bit different right now. But working with our consultants, our financial consultants, we think that it was the right thing to do, so that we have financial security as we no longer are earning that income, and it's in such a way that it's a fair and reasonable thing for Perkins Eastman to expect of us. And what's really interesting now, which does have a little bit of a financial component, is if we as Perkins Eastman, and I don't think other large firms are doing this from our research, I could be wrong, but looking at some sort of a transitional program where you want to call us emeritus, whatever word you might want to choose, because there are a few of us who find ourselves about the same age in the same situation here, particularly within the Western region. At the same time, we're thinking about what can we do now as emeritus members of Perkins Eastman that might somehow contribute some value to the firm, some intelligence, some mentoring. And as you know, I love mentoring, so I could be a mentor the rest of my life, be very happy, and maybe with a certain amount of income that's associated with it, whether it's hourly or whatever we ended up doing, to be able to continue to be an architect and to experience all of the privileges and the joys of it, and maybe make a little more money as we're retiring. So that hasn't been determined yet, but I think it's interesting that we have enough people who are interested to be talking about it as a collective right now, because what's going on is what's going on not just in architecture, it's in every business.
Right.
It is generational. I remember when we were graduating from college kind of talking about, we're this great generation, we have all of these people, and when we retire, there isn't going to be anybody here to replace us. And guess what? Here we are. And we like to think that there are those amazing, talented young people out there who would choose this path, and that they would find the same satisfaction that we have and be able to make their own contribution. So time will tell.
Yeah.
We don't all
They're
fry
out there.
first.
They are out there. They are.
I
It's
know they are, because
belie
I meet with them on a regular
you
basis.
do. Yeah. 6 of them.
Yep.
6 of them just from your firm. Yeah.
Oh, yes. No, I'm talking about the emerging professionals
I
also.
know. I
I
know.
get to meet
Yeah.
with them too.
Yeah, absolutely. Believe it or not, we've made it to the top of the hour already. So maybe as a
Unbelievable.
way to wrap this up, it's been a fantastic conversation, but maybe what's one piece of advice for anybody that's um, what's one piece of advice for anybody? And we've got a lot of firm owners here, small firm owners here. What do they need to know about considering the future, the life of their firm? And it may include, when someone calls and says, hey, what do you think about a merger? Do you have a piece of advice for them?
Be careful and thoughtful about it. I'm so glad that we did hire a third-party consultant early in the game. And I don't know if it's appropriate, but it is through the Wilcox Group, which Wilcox is long gone, but left a great legacy behind. And they actually brought us the person that we ultimately chose.
Yeah.
The other two came on their own. And just be thoughtful and careful about and ask the right questions. And if there's something that in particular concerns you, you have to look in, you have to find out, you have to get the answer first. You do not want to get the answer later. You don't want it to go south. One of the things that I realized in one of they just wanted us. And when we were gone, they were probably going to shut down the office.
Oh, one of the other candidates.
Yeah. So you have to be thinking about that if you care about your staff, which we did, because this was as much about them as it was about us. And so I'll just ask a gazillion questions. And yes, the same consultant did help us through the merger. And for all the attorneys on the call, please forgive me. The the suggestion he made is that we not hire an attorney. Said you're just going to get in trouble. And we had somebody else who was in the middle of pursuing a merger at the same time we were, who did hire an attorney, and it didn't happen. So, but we did ask our consultant, and he had, by the way, he'd been referred to us by two other friends who we really valued their opinion through AIA, who both were sort of had already used his services. And so they recommended him, and we interviewed him, and he came for a week, and he gave us his, response, to the point where when he made that call to call Brad, we already trusted him. So find somebody you trust. And he did. He was by our side and Perkins Eastman's side equally and fairly through the merger.
Excellent. Betsey, this has been fun. Thank you for taking us through all 4 chapters.
Jeff and Katharine, thanks so much for the opportunity. Thank you to everybody who called in. I really appreciate your interest, especially when they know our children. And so the day will come when all of you will become somebody's parents.
This is true.
As it should be.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care,
Thank you so
everybody.
much for this. Absolutely.
Thank
and for
you,
everybody out there, thank you. We appreciate you. Again, I say this every week, but if it weren't for those of you in the audience making context and clarity a thing, we would not be having this conversation with Betsey right now. So thank you for this opportunity. As we look forward, first of all, in our week, tomorrow we're going to wrap up this week of conversations by asking the question, what do you wish you knew when you were a young architect, or maybe when you were in school? What do you wish you knew about architecture at the very beginning? So that'll be our topic tomorrow. And then looking forward to Context and Clarity next week, our Context and Clarity Live next week, our guest will be Clifton Harness, one of the co-founders of TestFit. So as always, Saturday morning, I'll post about that. I'll ask you, what do you want to talk about next week? And we'll get prepared for another week of Context and Clarity. With that, again, thanks, everybody. Thank you, Katharine, for co-hosting this with me. Please, I say this every day. And like I said yesterday, this is also a reminder to me. Every time I say this, please be well, stay safe, keep those around you safe and well. Take a little bit of time to breathe. Relax, find a way to rejuvenate. We do this every day. You've got to pace yourself. Thanks for going along this journey with me. And I'll see you tomorrow, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.